Hello again, 122, to conclude Chapter 30 and World Civilizations 2. We will talk about two of the little tigers, South Korea and Taiwan, and some of the economic changes that have gone on in the post-World War II period in those two regions. And the other two tigers we won't talk about in this video are Singapore and Hong Kong as well, two of the huge economies in East Asia. And by the 1980s, several smaller states in the region, known collectively as the Little Tigers, had successfully followed the Japanese example. And South Korea is a peninsula divided. In 1953, the Korean peninsula was exhausted from 3 years of bitter fraternal war, and a conflict that took the lives of an estimated 4 million Koreans on both sides of the 38th parallel. Although a ceasefire was signed in July 1953, it was a fragile peace that left two heavily armed and mutually hostile countries facing each other suspiciously. And there is the Korean Peninsula since 1953 and has looked the same since the end of the Korean conflict. And north of the truce line was the People's Republic of Korea, a police state under the dictatorial rule of communist leader Kim Il-sung. And to the south was the Republic of Korea under the equally autocratic President Syngman Rhee, a fierce anti-communist who had led the resistance to the northern invasion. After several years of harsh rule in the Republic of Korea, marked by government corruption, fraudulent elections, and police brutality, demonstrations broke out in the capital city of Seoul in the spring of 1960 and forced Rhee into retirement. And in 1961, a coup d'etat in South Korea placed General Chung-hee Park in power. The new regime promulgated a new constitution, and in 1963, Park was elected president of a civilian government. He set out to foster recovery of the economy from decades of foreign occupation and civil war. Because the private sector had been relatively weak under Japanese rule, the government played an active role in the process by instituting a series of 5-year plans that targeted specific industries for development, promoted exports, and funded infrastructure development. And the program was a solid success, benefiting from Confucian principles of thrift, respect for education, and hard work, as well as from Japanese capital and technology. Korea gradually emerged as a major industrial power in East Asia. The largest corporations, including Samsung, Daewoo, and Hyundai, were transformed into massive conglomerates called the chaebol, the Korean equivalent of the zaibatsu of pre-war Japan. And Korean businesses began to compete actively. But like many other countries in the region, South Korea was slow to develop democratic principles. And although his government functioned with the trappings of democracy, Park continued to rule by autocratic means and suppressed all forms of dissidence. In 1979, Park was assassinated. And after a brief interregnum of democratic rule, in 1980, a new military government under General Chun Do-hwan seized power. The new regime was as authoritarian as its predecessors, but after student riots in 1987, by the end of the decade, opposition to autocratic rule had spread to much of the urban population. National elections were finally held in 1989, and South Korea reverted to civilian rule. Successive presidents sought to rein in corruption while cracking down on the chaebols and initiating contacts with the communist regime in the People's Republic of Korea on possible steps toward eventual reunification of the peninsula. After the Asian financial crisis in 1997, economic conditions temporarily worsened, but they have since recovered, and the country is increasingly competitive in world markets today. In the meantime, relations with North Korea remain tense. Multinational efforts to persuade the regime to suspend its nuclear program continue, although North Korea claimed to have successfully conducted a nuclear test in 2009. They probably are nuclear capable. And to add to the uncertainty, the regime faced a succession crisis when Kim Jong-il, the son and successor of founder Kim Il-sung, died suddenly in 2011 and was replaced by his inexperienced son, Kim Jong-un, who has increased the tension in the region by missile launches. So if they have missile capability and nuclear capability, this has created extreme tension with South Korea and also the United States, which is still has military forces on the peninsula today. Taiwan, the other China. After retreating to Taiwan following the defeat by the communists, Chiang Kai-shek's government, which continued to refer to itself as the Republic of China, contended it remained the legitimate representative of the Chinese people and would eventually return in triumph to the mainland. And in a relatively secure environment provided by the security treaty with the United States signed in 1954 that continues to this day, the Republic of China was able to concentrate on economic growth without worrying about a communist invasion. The government moved rapidly to create a solid agricultural base. A land reform program led to the reduction of rents, and land holdings over 3 acres were purchased by the government and resold to the tenants at reasonable prices. At the same time, local manufacturing and commerce were strongly encouraged. And by the 1970s, Taiwan had become one of the most dynamic industrial economies in East Asia. In contrast to the communist regime in the People's Republic of China, the Republic of China actively maintained Chinese tradition, promoting respect for Confucius and the ethical principles of the past. There is no cultural revolution in Taiwan, such as hard work, frugality, and filial piety. These are big reasons for their success. And the overall standard of living increased substantially. This is one of the wealthiest countries on earth. They have excellent health and sanitation conditions. Their literacy rates are quite high. And they had an active family planning program that reduced the rate of population growth. And this is modern Taiwan, the island. And after the death of Chiang Kai-shek in 1975, the Republic of China slowly began to move toward a more representative form of government, including elections and legal opposition parties. A national election in 1992 resulted in a bare majority for the nationalists over strong opposition from the Democratic Progressive Party. But political liberalizations had its dangers. Some members of the DPP began to agitate for an independent Republic of Taiwan, a possibility that aroused concern within the nationalist government in Taipei and frenzied hostility in the People's Republic of China. The election of DPP leader Chen Shui-bian as Republic of China president in March 2000 angered Beijing, which threatened to invade Taiwan should the island continue to delay unification with the mainland. The return to power of the Nationalist Party in 2008 has, at least for the time being, eased relations with mainland China. As a result, economic and cultural contacts between Taiwan and the mainland are steadily increasing, and this is the Taiwan Democracy Memorial. As you'll recall, the Chinese government sought to get rid of, during the Cultural Revolution, all vestiges of traditional culture. The Republic of China on Taiwan sought to preserve its cultural heritage as a link between past and present. And this policy is graphically displayed. This is Chiang Kai-shek's mausoleum in downtown Taipei. The mausoleum, with its massive entrance gate, was designed not only to glorify the nation's deceased president, but also to recall the grandeur of old China. And in 2007, this was renamed the Taiwan Democracy Memorial Hall in a bid by the government to downplay the island's historical ties to the mainland. And in 2016, Tsai Ing-wen became the first female president of Taiwan, and she is a member of the Independent Party. And will relations normalize with the mainland, and will Taiwan become part of mainland China again? It'll be interesting to see what happens in this region of the world. And so concludes World Civ 2.